Lukas has asked me to review The Maze Runner, which reminds me, was I asleep in 2014 or what? Because I don't remember anything about this movie when it came out. I don't remember seeing promotions or the cast interviews. All I remember is when the second one came out because I happened to see it in theaters. And you know what? The Scorch Trials wasn't a terrible movie. It had exciting moments despite being a pretty generic young adult dystopian thriller. I was able to follow it pretty well having not seen the first one. So that probably should have been a sign of the pointlessness that would be in the debut film. It's kind of weird that after the Hunger Games, this became an entire genre. Everything became a morphed version of the last thing. It started out with Harry Potter, which gave birth to Twilight, which then led to the Hunger Games, and then the Maze Runner, and it really began to burn out with Divergent, which never even got its final movie. Plus, all the one-offs in between. And the ideas of these dystopians got more complex and semi-imaginative. In the case of The Maze Runner, it's about these boys who are lifted into a more civilized version of the Lord of the Flies, I guess, surrounded by a cement barrier known as the maze. Why is this here? Who built it? How does it work? Honestly, you never get much of an explanation. It's one of those cases where the mystery is meant to drive the suspense, but for the most part, I don't really care about what's going on because the idea of this was so weird to begin with. Yet, it's kind of boring. It's obviously meant to set up the next movie, and I kind of wonder if the first book was like that. I mean, if someone wrote a book without knowing how successful it would be, they wouldn't keep so much hidden while forgetting to fill the plot with actual material. Why would we care about this story if we don't have a full understanding of the concept? I guess they were put up here as an experiment after the solar flares from the sun causes damage to the planet and humans. This maze was meant to test the kids in order to find a cure. As to why they would do it this way, who knows? I'm sure the book explains it better. Maybe the movie explains it better than how I understood it. It just seems like this kind of scenario is too sci-fi for a real world. I feel like, to an extent, dystopian stories are meant to be a somewhat realistic and dark look into the future while making comments and metaphors about the current state of things. Here, though, I don't really know what they're commenting on. I guess the human population is always on the brink of some kind of disaster, but we don't really get an idea of how this government works or the kinds of lives these kids lead. We don't really have anything to work off of. I guess it'd be fine if the characters had any kind of personality, but they really don't. Just like Twilight and Hunger Games, these kids are stale and uncharismatic. I know, given the circumstances of these kinds of movies, they're meant to be a bit dull and stern, as they've gone through a lot in their short lives. But at the same time, we need some kind of way to identify with the cast, and there's really nothing differentiating any of them. They all talk in exposition, which is funny because most of the stuff they're explaining is either pointless or builds towards nothing. I know the main guy is meant to be the most curious and determined of the bunch, which helps to start the revolution, I guess, but even he isn't too involving. He goes in the maze, fights a robot, finds a way out, leads the way. You've seen it all done before, but the bottom line is, I just don't care. There's also a girl that shows up, played by Chaos Goldelario, who I really liked in the last Pirates movie. Even her performance brings really nothing to the table. I don't really blame any of them though, they're not really allowed to have any kind of character, and this is just a very unemotional script. I hope the book is a little better since it managed to get a trilogy of films, but honestly, I found this to be a really boring sit. There isn't much to look at, there isn't much to think about. It has been quite a long time since a movie has left me this dumbfounded, because I really can't give too negative of a review. It doesn't really do anything offensive or dumb, and it's still structured like a normal plot, but I would really like to know who this appeals to. I'm not saying that to be rude, I'm just really curious as to the reasoning a person would be a fan of this franchise. Other than that, it has its fans. I think some people will like the dystopian aspects, even though I think they go a little too far. And like I said, it's still a movie, so you can't really give it the worst review. It's boring, but hey, you might like it.